All right, Hunter. Welcome back. A week later from when we chatted last Friday. Things have, from a Washington perspective, taken a little bit of a dour turn since then. But this is why last week and pretty much for the whole season, I said you live in the moment, you enjoy it, because this stuff doesn't happen to the University of Washington. Unfortunately, we're seeing the result of when you fly too close to the sun. It's always been one of my favorite sayings. You can't fly too close to the sun. Your wings are going to get burned. But we enjoyed our time up there next to the sun as much as we could.
Really difficult. Just go from being on cloud nine to being. It's just, I don't know, the stages of grief. I think the hardest thing right now is just accepting what this means for our football program. Like, what does that mean for UW nationally, that you can take a team to the national championship and you feel like it's just not a place maybe that you can win one, or it doesn't have the resources available to you? Because everything I saw, it looked like we offered up to $9 million. So it wasn't like there was a shortage of cash to retain DeBoer. It was just he saw a better opportunity. And, if he believes in himself and his staff, it makes sense to go to Alabama. It's the premier job in college football. But, wow, it's going to be tough to follow up Saban. I mean, they expect 12 wins a year there. So if anyone's up to the task, I'm sure it's DeBoer, but it hurts as a Husky fan.
Yeah, and I think universally, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some bad apples out there, Washington fans that are, upset or angry or saying things about DeBoer, but nothing but positive things from me. I would expect him to do a nice job down there at Alabama, but the expectations are going to be sky high. But I think when we've talked about this on here before, that the biggest edge Washington had this year had nothing to do with the players that they had on the field. It was the coach and the coaching staff, and that was the reality of the situation. And go down to Alabama. I think some of the recruiting challenges that was definitely going to be the one question mark, and that's the area that he was even struggling with a little bit at UW. Was even couldn't even get top 30 recruiting classes first couple of years. But with Saban sticking around down there and with the infrastructure of Alabama, if that's the only hole that he has to fill, we've seen what he can do with lesser talent. Even if he's not recruiting, the top 3, top 5 Alabama classes, I would still expect him to be at the top of the SEC with top 10 classes if that's the best he can do. And it'd be hard to do worse than that, I think, at Alabama.
Going to be interesting to see who he brings from the staff down to Alabama as well, because I imagine Alabama is going to want to get some ace recruiters on staff that have proven they can bring in the talent. Ryan Grubb interviewed with Alabama last year for the offensive coordinator job, turned down rumored like $2.5 million. There's some talks that, maybe he could be the guy at UW to follow up DeBoer, but we saw how that went last time hiring an assistant. I think a better move is to, as hard as it's going to be to move on from the DeBoer era, you can't just keep the parts. Like, you got to have a program that is established and everyone pulling rope in the same direction. And it's just hard if you're going to promote from within and then half the team or half the coaches leave. It's just difficult.
Yeah, I would agree. I would be leaning towards outside hire, and who knows who that will be. But I think overall, next year for Washington, for sure going to be a down year, but I think that was going to be the case. Even if DeBoer was still there, he obviously would have made the best of the situation. But I still think the future will be bright enough for Husky football with the you got all the money from this buyout coming in from Alabama, so that'll give us plenty of cash to distribute out to a new coach, plus the move to the Big 10. So it's unfortunate. It's too bad it happened. Would have loved to keep the DeBoer show going, but I think we deep down knew that we were flying, like I said, very close to the sun. Our wings were getting burned, and they were kept somehow. We kept flying. We flew as close to the sun as you really could get, and we haven't even talked about the championship game, which we were both there. We sat right next to each other at the game. Another one where not a lot of hard feelings about that game. We didn't play our best game. Things didn't go our way, but still fought into the fourth quarter of the national championship. It was all good by my account in the game as well.
Played our worst game of the year, but mostly credit to Michigan for just disrupting our offense. Penix wasn't able to stand in his spot, get his feet set. He wasn't running for his life, but he was getting rid of the ball right before he got hit multiple times. I didn't feel like we put our best foot forward, but I think a lot of that just has to do with how good Michigan was. And it's, if we were to play that game 10 times, I think Michigan wins 7 or 8 times. So yeah, nothing to hold our heads down about. good showing, competed, showed that UW can be on the national stage. But just dealing with DeBoer leaving after, it's tough.
Yeah, and I think that's another way to spin it on a positive side too. Obviously, DeBoer, a fantastic coach, and maybe a once in a 10 years type of coach or something like that. Time will tell from that perspective. But 2 of the last 3 coaches at Washington have taken them to the playoff. We'll have a new 12-team playoff system. I think, it sucks today, but the ascendancy might take a little bit dip down next year, but I think things are still moving forward. And as we've said on here before, I grew up a Washington fan when they won no games. So still many steps in the right direction. I think just from that perspective, when you can say that 2 of the last 3 coaches at Washington took them to the playoffs, got them into the top 4 teams in the country, there's the infrastructure at Washington to have a lot of success. So we'll be excited to see who the new coach is. And it's obviously going to be a highly sought after job. You step out outside maybe the top 10 coaches in the country. And I think most would want to trade their scenarios for the opportunities with Washington and what is ahead for them. But that means football season is behind us. And that means that the focus shifts almost exclusively to basketball, where the Huskies did pick up a victory last night over Arizona State. So at least one little positive for us. But another wild week of college hoops, Hunter. There are no good teams in the country, or are there just a lot of medium good teams? What's your perspective as another week where pretty much all the top teams go down?
I think there are no great teams. I think there's a handful of really good teams, but there's not the team that you can just sharp you into the Final Four even. I think all the teams at the top have holes. I also just think the transfer portal has really leveled the playing field a lot. And it's hard to be a great team these days because so many teams in your conference are pulling mid-major guys up, giving them the opportunities. One nice thing about the transfer portal is that it helps players find the right level for them. And as much as it is about players transferring up, it's players transferring down. So you're not seeing schools get stuck with kids on scholarship that aren't playable. Like there's so much roster turnover every year that I think it's just making it more difficult to be a great team in college basketball because the level of competition has gone up.
Yep, absolutely. And we've seen a lot of these losses coming on the road, and that's been a story that we've talked about since almost the first set of road non-conference games all the way back in late November, is that it's tough to win on the road. And when you're not a great team, it becomes really tough to win on the road. And that has largely been the story. None of these teams, for the most part, have suffered too many losses at home. It's all been the road games. But I guess before we get into the games for this weekend, give me your current top 5 from a perspective of if these teams all were on a neutral floor. Number 1 is the team that you would expect to be, maybe favored, or the team you'd pick against any of them. We can go back and forth, and maybe you start with your number 1. I'll go my number 1, and we'll go from there. But yeah, on a neutral floor right now, who do you think you'd have as the number 1 team?
I'd have the Houston Cougars. I think the way that they play defense, I just have to trust that. I think of all the teams and what everyone does at the highest level, I think Houston's defense is the most elite group. So I'd take Houston at number 1.
Yeah, I think I'd stick with Purdue. I think it's those couple losses that they've had on the road now, far from ideal, both games that you would kind of expect them to win. I don't think they've suffered losses to teams that are going to be huge threats later in the season, losing those games to both Northwestern and Nebraska. But with the inside out threat of Edey and the 3-point shooting of Smith and Lawyer, to me, it's still Purdue at number 1. But I think I would then go, I don't even know if I'd go Houston number 2. I assume you've got Purdue number 2.
Purdue at number 2. And I think also just the stylistic matchup of Houston versus Purdue. We've talked about it before, but the guards on Purdue can have some issues with athleticism. I just think it really plays into Houston's hand, just with their athleticism and their ability to defend Purdue if that were to be a matchup.
I think I'm going to go a little outside the box here. It's a team we've talked about a good amount on here, and I've just been impressed with how they've started ACC play. I think I have North Carolina actually at this moment all the way up there. They're number 8 right now in the VCI, but you just look when they have their best 5 on the floor. They've got Ingram out there. They've got Baycott's playing. He's been playing a lot better come ACC play. Cadeau's great. Cormac Ryan. I just think that their 5, when they're playing well, they've just got all the positions. They've got all the pieces. Not one of those teams where we say they got to do this, they got to do that. They can kind of do everything. They can shoot the 3. They can get to the rim. They can rebound. So they've been playing defense a lot better. as of late. So yeah, a little outside the box, but I like what I'm seeing from this North Carolina team come conference play so far. And then, yeah, I think I'd have Houston 3. So my top 3 at the moment: Purdue, North Carolina, Houston. Who do you slide in there, number 3?
I still like Arizona, even though I think they've fallen out of the national media a little bit. I still really like what they're able to do. I like the way that they get up and down. They have so many different guys that can score the basketball. They have older guys like Caleb Love. I trust him in a big game environment. Kylan Boswell, I think, continues to look like one of the best point guards in the country, and he's only going to get better as the season goes on with his first year at the helm. He was sitting behind Kerr Kriisa last year. Kylan Boswell was like 17 last year because he came early, but he is so good. So I think I'd have Arizona at number 3.
Yeah, and that'd be number 4 for me for sure. And then for that 5th spot for me, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say this once Klingon is back. I just still think this UConn team, we know how hard it is to win on the road in the Big East. They've gone and done it a couple times now against reasonable opponents. That win over Xavier was a hard fought. They probably should have won that game by double digits, but held on at the end. I still think this UConn team, and we saw them do it a little bit last year too, where they got off to that great start, kind of struggled a little bit middle of the season and got it back together. Just the culture, the style of play, the variety of different slashers, and then obviously Tristan Newton at guard. Once they get Klingon back, I think UConn for me will quickly slot back into the top 5. How about you?
One with a healthy Klingon, I think UConn's the best team in the country, to be honest. But health is everything when it comes to sports. You know, the best ability is availability, and if he's not out there, that's something that you have to take into account. But yeah, once Klingon comes back and they're healthy, they've looked very good.
So let's get into the games of the day, or games of the days, as we tend to do here on Friday and Saturday. Nice little, we didn't do any pods this week because we were traveling all around for the national championship. But a solid week for us on the picks. Moved to we're 47-26 coming into today's selection, and not too many good games tonight. The kind of top game, according to the VCI, in the ranks is actually a matchup in the Mountain West, which pretty much every day now in the Mountain West, when you flip to the ranks, you see a reasonably top 5, top 10 game. This one, Boise State and Nevada. Nevada -6, Boise State +6.5. I don't really have a bet on this one, but this Nevada team's 15-1 now into the Mountain West, and the top of the Mountain West has been a battle. This Boise State team just beat Colorado State. Colorado State was doing great in the non-conference. They've lost to Utah State, and they've lost to Boise State in back-to-back games. Tomorrow we've got New Mexico against who's New Mexico playing tomorrow? I saw it. San Diego State. So Mountain West continues to be a just a slugfest pretty much night in and night out, and they're looking like a 4 or 5 bid league at this point.
Feels like every week the Pac-12 loses a bid and the Mountain West gains a bid. Like the Mountain West is looking easily like a 5 bid league right now because they have San Diego State, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado State, Utah State, I think firmly in the field at this point. And then you have Boise State who's knocking on the door. Yeah, the Mountain West is such a fun conference. And I think you're going to see a lot of lines where regardless of where the teams are ranked, they're going to be underdogs when they go on the road in some of these hostile environments. The Mountain West is awesome this year.
Yeah, and with Gonzaga losing again, they'll finally get kicked out of the top 25. I mean, it's outrageous that they were still in the top 25 in the first place. We've been talking about that for a few weeks. But WCC, to me, that's a 1-bid league. I really don't think there's an at-large team in the WCC. And as you said, the last year of the Pac-12 has been not one to write home about. For sure, to this point, UCLA playing some of the worst basketball on offense in the history of college basketball. So, yes, it's out west. It's Mountain West only for the rest of this year, for me at least.
Can't remember a worse year for the LA schools between USC and UCLA. UCLA could finish last in the Pac-12. They're that bad. And USC has been such a disappointment from what the preseason expectations were. It's been a really tough year for LA. And I think that also just speaks to like the death of the Pac-12 in a large part was because USC and UCLA weren't doing what they were supposed to do, because in football, you need USC to be a national contender. And in basketball, you need UCLA. And seasons like this are why the Pac-12 died, because, you know, the best teams weren't able to put it together. So, yeah, it's a fitting way for the Pac-12 to go out.
Andy Enfield, is he on the hot seat here? Because it seems like this has been the story of a lot of USC teams. I mean, we always track USC pretty closely, being Pac-12 fans, and the recruiting classes are always good. I don't think the recruiting classes have ever been as good as they were this year. You got Bronny James. Obviously, he didn't come into the season fully healthy, and that would have held him back. But Andy Enfield's never winning a championship at USC. He's never taken them to the Final Four. He's a Sweet 16 at best coach at USC. I think with them moving to the Big 10, at least for me, I've got Andy on the hot seat for sure.
I think the seat's getting really warm for him. Isaiah Collier just went out for 4 to 6 weeks with a wrist injury. So that'll give more opportunities for Bronny. But yeah, USC is one of those jobs that they expect a lot. And I mean, it doesn't even have a great home court, but it's just the fact that it's University of Southern California. Like, they expect to be really good. And I think it might be time to move on from Enfield if he's not able to figure it out. You know, like, their best teams had the Mobley brothers, and he hired the Mobley's dad to be the assistant coach. So, yeah, it might have run its course.
It's been a while. It's crazy how long it's been there. It feels like it was just yesterday. He was down there, Florida Gulf Coast, leading him to the Sweet 16 right for Florida Gulf Coast. But, yeah, things have not gone too well. I do have one pick tonight. Friday. Didn't have any picks last night. I was going to pick Illinois in the Michigan State Illinois game, but then I looked at that spread and I was like, no, that spread's fair. And it ended up being exactly the spread. So I gave myself a little tap on the back there for sitting that one out. Didn't have a good feel for it. But Dayton, a team we haven't talked about much at all this year, but they just have been slowly but surely chugging along in the non-conference and in the A10. They lost early in the year to Northwestern, and they lost to Houston early in the year, but they've just been chugging along since then. They won at SMU. They won it semi-away game against Cincinnati. So, like, those are solid wins, and the Dayton team's looking good. They played Duquesne tonight, and Duquesne's number 97 in the BCI. Dayton is number 26. Dayton's plus 1.5 in this game. And when I look at the stats, I see a lot of things that I like for Dayton basketball tonight. First, on the assists, they assist 62% of their baskets. Duquesne is 212th in the country in stopping assists. So I think Dayton's going to be able to move the ball nicely. And then the 3-point line. Dayton's 4th in the country in 3-point shooting 41% from 3. Duquesne 256th in 3-point defense. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring for Dayton. And then on the other side of the ball, this Dayton defense, 75th in the country. Duquesne's offense outside the top 200. So Dayton is clearly the better team here. The only reason that they would be underdogs on the road is a potential road environment at Duquesne. But I know you're the environment guy. I don't have Duquesne high on my list of tough places to play.
Duquesne definitely not too high on my list. It's a weird line. Like, Dayton's clearly the better team. Dayton's proven that they're the better team in multiple matchups that they've had. Yeah, their strengths play to Duquesne's weaknesses. So I like that pick.
Yeah, Dayton's worst loss on the year is to number 52. That was to Northwestern, and we know Northwestern's a really good team. Duquesne's best win is number 79. That was against UC Irvine. So, yeah, this would only be a Vegas knows situation where they know something that we don't hear that has this as a plus 1.5. But so far this year, we've had success just going off of the numbers and going with what makes sense. So I'm not going to overthink this one, and I'm going to take the Dayton Flyers tonight. And Deron Holmes, KenPom, has a number 6 in the country right now in his National Player of the Year. I know you were high on him before the year. They lost their point guard before the season, but it seems like everything is moving ahead nicely for Anthony Grant there in the A10.
Deron Holmes, if you guys haven't seen him play, he plays like college Al Horford. He can knock down the 3, but he's got like the slowest pump fake. And then when he gets into the lane, he's so methodical. But he's been so good for them. He's definitely looking like he's going to win A10 Player of the Year.
That is our pick for Friday, which takes us into Saturday. And for these Saturday games, we're going to just go conference by conference, talk about a few of the games, see what selections we have. Let's start with the Big 12 because it's obviously, for the most part, pretty clearly the best conference in the country as things stand. We've already seen some upsets. We've seen some good games already out of this conference. Some good ones tomorrow. The first one, this one actually number 1 in the rankings of game 6 o'clock. It's number 1 Houston against number 32 TCU. This TCU team surprised me a little bit. I know we picked against them against Kansas. They were in that game until the wire. Probably got a pretty bad call to go against them. Honestly, I'm actually going to say it was the right call, but it was an unfortunate situation. And if the rule was different, probably shouldn't have been a foul. But they come home and take care of business against an Oklahoma team that we really like. This Houston team goes on the road and loses to Iowa State in a game that's just classic Houston basketball, 57-53 there against Iowa State. Houston, you just told me that you think they're still the number 1 team in the country. They got to go on the road here and with a 6-point spread. Any thoughts on this one?
It'll be interesting to see if TCU can get out and run. They're leading the nation in fast break points. I think it's like 24 to 28% of their possessions are fast break opportunities. Houston's a really hard team to run against. They are so athletic and they set up their defense. So it'll be an interesting style clash between TCU's pace trying to get out ahead of that Houston defense and what the Houston Cougars are able to do setting up their defense. If I had a side, I love Houston, but 6 feels like a lot on the road. I definitely could see Houston winning this game. But like we saw what they did at Hilton against Iowa State, low scoring affair, going to be close the whole way. It's a rock fight. I like TCU's ability to score the ball and keep pace with the Houston team that's on the road.
Yeah, it's actually it's definitely a pace battle here. Houston 353rd in the country in pace. That's just about last in the country. TCU 38th. It's actually somewhat similar matchup for Houston going on the road as it was to Iowa State. TCU's defense 13th in turnover percentage. I think Iowa State's first in the country in turnover defense. So pretty similar matchup. I think TCU can score the ball, to your point, a little bit better than Iowa State can. I'm also not going to take a side here just because I do think it's going to be a low scoring game, probably a game in the 60s. And with a 6, I do think Houston wins this game, but don't have a lean at the moment. I'll keep an eye on this spread. The game's not till 6 o'clock, so things could move and make it a little bit more interesting. But another interesting piece of this is TCU's 26th in the country in assists. They assist 61% of their baskets. And we've talked about what this Houston defense wants to do. They're almost dead last in the country in allowing assists because that's the style they play. They're not going to let you drive to the basket against them. So I think TCU actually matches up pretty nicely here. If I had a side, I'd probably go TCU. That'd be my lean in this one. But if Houston is the number one team in the country, if they remain number one in the BCI, we're going to need to see them win this basketball game. They can't go on the road and lose 2 straight games to open Big 12 play after some questions about their strength of schedule in the non-conference, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally agree.
Next up in the Big 12, the couple teams we just talked about there and the common opponents of Houston and TCU. That is Oklahoma, who's number 20 in the VCI, going to Kansas. Kansas has fallen down to number 18 in the VCI. They still only have 2 losses. We were just talking about them last Friday. We were saying this Kansas team has kept the show on the road. It hasn't been pretty, but and since then, they barely beat TCU. They probably should have lost that game. And then they lose to UCF, and I believe UCF's first ever game in the Big 12. The line on this one is Kansas minus 5.5, Oklahoma plus 5.5, and over under in the 142.5 to 143 range. Oklahoma on the flip side, they beat Iowa State at home. That was a solid victory for them. They go on the road and lose to TCU. I think this is a pretty competitive matchup. Obviously, the VCI is at number 20 and 18, but this is going to be a compelling basketball game at 2 o'clock at Allen Fieldhouse.
I think it's a get-right spot for Kansas. Tough loss, losing to Central Florida on the road. But I trust the Jayhawks at home. Fog Allen's going to be rocking. I mean, until Kansas shows me that they're definitely not the cream of the crop in the Big 12, I'm going to trust them. Like, I know Central Florida is a tough loss on the road, but at the end of the day, it is a road game. And we've seen time and time again this year how difficult it is to go and win on the road, no matter who you are and no matter who you're playing. So I like Kansas in this spot to get right. I think the spread would be a little bigger if they hadn't gone and lost to Central Florida on the road, but you have to take each game in stride.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I mean, Oklahoma just lost to TCU. TCU is a 6-point underdog, I think, on the road at Kansas last Friday or last week when we talked on this show. Now we get Oklahoma a week later coming off an 11-point loss to TCU at plus 5.5. I mean, the stats here, there's not a bunch of stats that are overly exciting for this Kansas team. I think Oklahoma matches up pretty well here. I think an advantage for Kansas would be that they don't let Oklahoma get to the line, 16th in the country and allowing free throws. And we've talked about the Allen Fieldhouse. You're not going to get any calls there. The matchup will come. Kansas is first in the country. They're still assisting 72.5% of their baskets, where Oklahoma's 34th in the country in assist defense, only 43.6%. So the more I look at it, I was about to say that I'm going to join you on the Kansas train. I think I'm going to sit it out just because I worry for Kansas. If Oklahoma's taking away their passing attack, that means we've got to rely on DeJuan Harris driving the lane and getting to the rim. And I'm officially out on the DeJuan Harris bandwagon. So I'm going to have to sit this one out just because if it comes down to a drive competition, Kansas doesn't. That's their weakness is guys going off the dribble.
Yeah, Kansas struggles creating their own shot. It's a lot of when they're at their best, it's DeJuan Harris creating for their other playmakers, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson on the lobs and inside, Kevin McCullough on the outside. But yeah, to your point, I would like to see Kansas just throw it into Dickinson a little more in the post and let him create, and then also run the offense through him, force teams to send doubles, kick it out for open threes, because you're right that when DeJuan Harris has to be a scorer, they're not as good as when he's a playmaker when they can be really exceptional.
Yep, I agree. So another one to sit out there. Again, it's Saturday of college basketball in January. There's going to be loads of opportunities for bets, so no need to chase anything that we don't like. Two other Big 12 games. We've got Cincinnati traveling to Baylor. Cincinnati coming off of a loss to Texas, a game that Texas needed to get right. We saw Baylor play against BYU in their first game in the new, or I don't know, my second game in their new arena. Baylor got the job done there. And then that BYU team is traveling to UCF. BYU, another team we talked about last Friday, the start to the Big 12 campaign for the Cougars, not going according to plan.
Yeah, welcome to the Big 12. Computer darlings all preseason, but welcome to it, BYU, and it's not going to get easier. So it's going to be interesting to see how this team responds. Central Florida is going to be playing on fire. They just knocked off Kansas. They're going to be looking for another big win. Nothing comes easy in the Big 12. So welcome to it, BYU. You're not in the Mountain West anymore. We're gonna find out really quickly what this BYU team's made of.
Yep, I agree. And I think that's why for both of these games, the rest of these Big 12 games, actually the Big 12 in general, obviously we didn't take a pick in those first two games. I'm not taking a pick in either of those games either. I think I don't have a strong pulse yet on the Big 12. I think some of these teams, to your point, were computer darlings in the non-conference. We're starting to see some actual games played against top-level competition. So I'm going to use this Saturday as a little bit of a feeling out process for the Big 12. I'm going to have an eye on it, but probably not going to have any bets. But that takes us to a conference where we do like to have some bets, and one that we've been betting on most of the year. That's the Big East Conference. I'm back in New York. You're back in New York. Our winter travels are over, which means we've got boots back on the ground in Big East country, and so I'm going to have some action without a doubt on the Big East. The first game, 1 o'clock tomorrow. The Johnnies, St. John's, Rick Pitino. The boys are playing basketball. The city is excited here in New York. The Knicks are playing well. St. John's is playing well. Things are going well in the city. They're traveling to Creighton, and they're plus 8.5 against Creighton. Creighton is, you can get minus 7.5 on Creighton, plus 8.5 on the Johnnies. Without looking at the stats, which we'll get to here in a second, that feels like a lot of points because this Johnnies team is pretty competitive, and I haven't been too impressed by Creighton at all.
That does feel like a lot of points, and St. John's has Joel Soriano to match Kalkbrenner on the inside. So I think that's not a favorable matchup for them, but it's one where they can hopefully match what Kalkbrenner is able to do. The Johnnies have stormed up the VCI rankings. I think they're all the way up to number 29.
Yep.
There's really not many teams hotter in the country than them. They're playing together. They're playing defense. They just look like they're having more fun out there. Yeah, it's a lot of points for Creighton to cover.
Yeah, it reminds me of a few weeks ago when we had the Villanova Creighton game and it was plus 9.5, and we said that feels like too many points, and then Villanova won that game, and now Creighton or St. John's beat Villanova on the road by 10 last week. Looking at the stats here, it is a favorable matchup statistically for Creighton on the defensive side of the ball. The St. John's offensive stats still aren't strong, but I think this is one of those, to your point, where St. John's is playing different basketball than they were for the early part of the season, so some of their stats aren't going to look quite as pretty right now as if we maybe looked at these stats over the last 5 games. But I've really liked what we've seen from St. John's so far in Big East play. I don't know how you couldn't like what you've seen from them. They're 4-1. Their only loss coming on the road to UConn in a game that they were pretty competitive. So for me, this is going to be a non-stats based play. I'm just going to ride the hot hand with the Johnnies. Creighton's fine. Creighton's still number 13 in the VCI, but they haven't done much at all to get me overly excited. St. John's average win now is up to 135.5 in the VCI. Creighton's is 169.3. These seem like pretty even basketball teams. I'm sure the crowd will be something to deal with there in Omaha, but also at the same time, I think this Creighton team's down a little bit. I think the fans are a little bit not as excited maybe as they were at the beginning of the season, so I'm not sure the atmosphere will be quite what it was earlier in the year. So yeah, give me the Johnnies plus 8.5 here. My first time riding with the Johnnies since they screwed me against Boston College. I still don't know how they lost that game, but that was the low point. It's been riding it back up, so hopefully I don't buy the top here, but I'll take the Johnnies.
Yeah, I like it. Creighton's good, but they're definitely not who they were hyped up to be in the preseason.
Yeah, I think we're still seeing some of that in like the computer metrics for them. Like the fact that they're still 13 in the BCI seems a little high for me. And I think that they're an efficient team. Like the computers love the way that they play, but the St. John's team, there's something about them. They're Patino. He's got something figured out, and I expect them to be competitive in this one tomorrow. The only other Big East game of note, Xavier against Providence. Both teams moving in the wrong direction at the moment.
The Bryce Hopkins injury is huge for Providence, arguably their best player right there with Devin Carter. And they were so hot. Like they just moved into the top 25. They were looking amazing. They had the great win over Marquette. And then, yeah, Bryce Hopkins gets hurt. They just didn't look like the same team playing at Creighton. Xavier, not a tournament team. Sean Miller, he's a great coach, but this team just doesn't have what it takes. So, yeah, two teams that are trending in the wrong direction in Big East play.
That is exactly how I would describe it as well. That takes us from the Big East down to the SEC. Alabama has not the logo I want to be seeing at the moment, but that's the third game of the day. It's number 11 Alabama, still loved by the computers and playing better basketball. To be fair, most of their losses came earlier in the season against top teams, so they haven't really done anything terrible yet. They're traveling to Mississippi State. Mississippi State is a team that is tough to figure out. They've done some things poorly. I mean, they lost at South Carolina, but then they come home and they beat Tennessee. We know what they are. We know what Chris Jans basketball is all about. It's the defensive side of the floor. So we've got ourselves a good old-fashioned clash of styles here, Hunter. The high-flying Alabama offense against this lockdown Mississippi State defense. The lines here, Alabama favored -1.5, Mississippi State +1.5 in a clash of offense and defense like this. Which side do you tend to lean towards?
Styles make fights. I like Mississippi State on the defensive end in this one. I like them at home. Mississippi State, I'll take the defense over the offense when it's the offense going on the road most times. I flip that around. If it's at home, I'll take the offense over the defense typically. But yeah, I trust Mississippi State to defend. I trust them to slow this game down, muck it up, and I just love Chris Jans.
Interestingly, the over-under here, 155.5. So they tend to think that the offensive pace is going to lead to some scoring. But again, Alabama's a team that averages 90 points a game. So a total in the 155 range actually isn't overly too high for Alabama, Mississippi State. I'm going to keep tabs on this line. If this moved to Mississippi State being favored and I got some points on Alabama, I'd probably take that. I think this line's probably pretty fair here. But for Alabama, this is a chance to kind of prove that those computer love of them early in the season is reasonable. If they can go on the road and pick up this win, especially after Tennessee just went on the road and lost, I think that'd be very positive signs for Alabama and what they can do in this conference. Because if their offense is firing, maybe only Kentucky is the other team in the SEC that I think of as capable of matching the firepower of what Alabama brings. And most of the teams are defensively focused.
Yeah. The SEC is going to be a slugfest this year.
And that Kentucky team, number 16 in the BCI, they're playing Texas A&M at 2 o'clock tomorrow. I know you texted that you kind of like Texas A&M in this game. I like this Kentucky team. I think this Kentucky team could be special. I think that they continue to impress us going on the road. We talked about the battle in the swamp. You described it as the toughest place to play in the SEC, or one of them. They've won that one. That win over North Carolina is looking better and better now that North Carolina is playing well. So besides Kentucky unbelievably losing at home to UNC Wilmington, things have been going pretty well for this Kentucky team. And things have not been going too well for this Texas A&M team. They've lost to Virginia, Memphis, Houston. They lost to LSU. LSU is like 20-point underdogs to Auburn tonight. And then they lost to Auburn. They only scored 55. They've only scored 53 points and 55 points in their last two games. This Kentucky offense is legit. The Texas A&M defense from 3 is terrible. UK strokes the 3. So like plus 1.5. I don't know how Texas A&M is going to score, and I trust Kentucky to score against anybody. I think I got to ride with Calipari here.
Yeah, it makes sense. The reason I stuck out to me was I couldn't believe it when I saw it. Like Kentucky's been so good, and A&M's been reeling. Yeah, interesting matchup. Again, like styles make fights. Kentucky wants to get up and down. Texas A&M wants to get down the stance and defend. Kentucky, Rob Dillingham looks like he could be an NBA All-Star. He's definitely cementing himself as a top 5 pick. So they're really coming on. And to your point, that North Carolina win just continues to look better and better. This is one of the better teams Calipari's had in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, they're good. I think people got thrown off a little bit because they lost that game at home, and they almost lost to St. Joe's in overtime before that. But I think that's just a team. This is a young team, as it tends to be with Calipari. We knew they'd get better as the year goes on. The defense was really poor to start the year. The defense is improving. It's up to number 86 in the defensive efficiency, and the offense is just legit. I mean, they have multiple NBA players on the offensive side of the floor. That's going to work out pretty well against most college opponents. This Texas A&M offense is in UCLA territory at bad. They're 357th in three-point shooting, 26%. UK shooting 40% from 3. Like, Kentucky could lose. It's the SEC. It's a road game. It's going to be a tough environment. I'm sure Buzz Williams is going to have them fired up down there at A&M. But like, you give me that big of a 3-point discrepancy, it's just you need some luck to go your way to not lose this game by double digits if you're Texas A&M, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky's definitely the more talented team in this matchup. But we'll see what Buzz Williams can coach the boys up to do.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take Kentucky plus 1.5. It's in the same boat as the Dayton plus 1.5, where both of them don't really make sense. And so I'll take both and hope that at worst one of them goes well and one of them doesn't. But yeah, if Kentucky, they're 16 in the VCI. They've been moving up steadily. I like this Kentucky team. Interestingly, this game opened as Pick'em and on FanDuel, and it moved to this plus 1.5. So we'll see what happens. Maybe there's something going on with Kentucky. It is a little bit of a weird line, but on paper, this is a Kentucky win. See anything else in the SEC? Tennessee, they're trying to bounce back. They're going to Georgia, number 4 versus number 74. They're 7-point favorites in that game. And yeah, here it is. Yeah, LSU, 16.5-point underdogs to Auburn. This Auburn team up to number 5 in the VCI. We've had our eyes on Auburn all year long, and it's really starting to show. Almost impossible to win a game at Auburn. They've that crowd, they love their basketball down there at Auburn. Bruce, I think Buzz Williams said it. Auburn basketball game is what college basketball is supposed to be.
Auburn basketball, welcome to the jungle. It gets rocking in there. I actually trust them to cover this spread against LSU. Like, I see them beating LSU by 20-plus points. Cue the Will Wade music.
Get him back there. The thing is, this Auburn team has depth too. Like, they can, if Holloway's playing well, they go with him at point guard. But like down the stretch of the Texas A&M game, they have that other guy that they put in at point guard. They have like 8-9 guys who are legit. This Auburn team's really good. The top of the SEC will be. I think we get a Final Four team out of the SEC this year. That's my stance on the SEC.
I like that too.
Like I Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, somebody's going to be making a run.
I can tell you who it's not going to be is Arkansas.
We were on the fade Arkansas bandwagon long ago, and we've been proven right there. That is not a good basketball team there. They've got some work to do to figure things out for next year because not much to play for them this year. Let's go to the Big 10. The Big 10 Conference. Northwestern traveling to Wisconsin. Wisconsin's up to number 12 in the VCI. We talked about them throwing the ball off the backboard, alley-oop dunks. Different style of play this year from Wisconsin, but boy, it's working out well for them. They just keep taking care of business. They've beaten Ohio State, Nebraska, Iowa, 3 in a row to start January here in the Big 10. They get this Northwestern team who's a roller coaster. You can get great basketball from Northwestern. You can get terrible basketball from Northwestern. The spread here, 8.5, plus 8.5 Northwestern, minus 7.5 Wisconsin. Haven't seen much Badger basketball. You're our voice of the Badgers. How are you feeling about this team? Because they're looking pretty good.
This team's looking really good. And with Terrence Shannon Jr. being out for Illinois, I'm going to go ahead and say I think Purdue's going to win the Big 10. but I think Wisconsin's right there competing for that second spot. Wisconsin's really good this year, and if you haven't watched them, they're not playing like they used to play. They're playing more up tempo. They have more flair. They're a good team. Yeah.
Get the tortoises out, get the turtles out there. Haslam metrics. We've got 344th in pace for Northwestern, 333 in pace for Wisconsin. So we've got the probably 4 turtle matchup here. Surprisingly, I usually think of Wisconsin as defense. To your point, and how they're playing differently, the defense isn't very good. They're 284th in effective field goal defense. Northwestern's 245th in effective field goal defense. This one, the total's 135.5. I said I'm retired from totals. Also, a quick aside that I have retired from totals. I ran the numbers on the bets this year. The totals, the totals are a crapshoot. I'm out on totals. I might get back in because they're fun to watch, but I've had to retire from totals. But if I wasn't retired from totals, the over in this game would be my pick. You go against the 4 tortoises and you play the over because these defenses aren't very good. But I'm retired.
Nothing better than taking the over and just sitting and enjoying every bucket.
Well, I officially retired at the end of the BYU Baylor game because that game should have gone over easily. But then BYU just surrendered with like a minute to go and wasn't even trying. And it was back-to-back overs that I had that game, and also Utah State, Colorado State last week. Both lost by 0.5, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I'm out on the totals. What else we got in the Big 10 tomorrow? Not much. There's the Big 10. Outside the top teams in the Big 10, it drops off pretty quickly, which takes us to the ACC. Let's see if we got anything of note in the ACC. Syracuse is heading to North Carolina. The North Carolina team is playing well, as we talked about. Boston College against Clemson, Miami against Virginia Tech. Yeah, not much going on in the ACC for us either. Really, the only other good game tomorrow is the Mountain West. I think we got to add the Mountain West into the power conference discussion here. It's the game we were just talking about a little bit earlier. It's San Diego State, number 22 in the VCI, traveling to New Mexico, who is number 45 in the VCI. San Diego State plus 2.5, New Mexico minus 1.5 in this one. San Diego State playing good basketball since that loss to Grand Canyon. They've won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in a row. New Mexico, I don't know what to make of this New Mexico team. They've lost to Colorado State and UNLV 2 out of the last 3. They beat Wyoming. I think San Diego State's probably the better team here, but I'm hearing some of the New Mexico Final Four buzz that we were hearing before the year. What's your take on the Lobos?
New Mexico is erratic as hell, and they get rattled on the road in a big way. But at home, they're tough as nails, and they're really good at scoring the ball offensively. I like New Mexico. Like, I'm going to continue to like the home teams in these close games. And even when the higher ranked teams go on the road in the Mountain West, I'm going to continue to like, we saw Colorado State go on the road and drop that game to Utah State. I'm going to continue to like the good teams. On the other side of that coin, though, I like the good teams when they go play the bad Mountain West schools. Like, I feel like everyone's covering against San Jose State on the road. The Mountain West is just so top heavy that those 6 teams are in a class of their own.
Yeah, and I'm going to join you. I think I'll take the New Mexico minus 1.5 here, purely for that reason that all of these games so far in the Mountain West, that the better team has gone on the road. This has been the exact spread almost every single time, and the home team has won and covered every single time. So I'm going to ride the wave with you. There's no real statistics that I'm going to point to here on New Mexico. To your point, they score the ball nicely. Their defense does match up well here against San Diego State. It's really both teams kind of pride themselves on the defensive end of the floor. So it's going to be who's able to score more baskets. And yeah, you get at home. You tend to be the team who can score more baskets. You also tend to be the team that can get to the free throw line a little bit more. So yeah, I'll take the Lobos here, minus 1.5 against San Diego State in Albuquerque tomorrow, 2:00 in the Pit. It's always a tough place to play down there at the Pit. You're the atmospheres guy. That's a good one.
That's a top atmosphere. Definitely in the MWC might be the best atmosphere.
So that's 4 picks. I like to have 5 picks. I always like to have an odd number of selections. I'd rather end the day 2 and 3 than 2 and 2, if I'm being honest with you. So I'm going to quickly take another look through the games here to see if there's something that catches my eye, or were there any other games that you had an eye on or could point me in the right direction here as I try to find a fifth play of the day.
I do like where your mindset is, though. It's like Dion Waiters. He said, I'd rather go, what do you say? I'd rather go 0 for 30 than 0 for 9, because if I went over 9, it means I stopped shooting. So, yeah, there's got to be more plays out there.
Well, we can actually quickly, some of these lines have updated from some of the games earlier that we talked about. So that Houston, it's gone from 6 to 4.5 in that one. So Houston minus 4.5 in that one. Oklahoma, Kansas still the same spread. Cincinnati and Baylor has gone from 6.5 down to 5.5 in that one. I'm trying to see what else we got going on here. We got this BYU UCF game's an interesting one. It's 4.5 in that one. BYU going on the road. I still like this BYU team. I think that they played much better. I didn't see the game against Cincinnati. I don't really understand how they lost that game at home, but they definitely did look better next time out.
What is a UNC Syracuse in Chapel Hill?
Minus 12.5 North Carolina.
I like the heels there. Like I don't like Syracuse, and I think that UNC is on the level that Duke is on in the ACC, and Syracuse got outclassed when they went to Durham. So I like the heels minus 12.5 in that one.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Syracuse against good teams has been getting waxed on the road. They lost by 22 to Virginia, who's not very good. They lost by 20 to Duke, who's solid, but we think North Carolina is better. We look at this game statistically. North Carolina's defense, yeah, I don't really know how Syracuse is going to score. And then you've got North Carolina coming back the other way. We know what they can do on the offensive end. I'm going to back pocket that one for just a second, but I do like that. Let me look at this Houston game just one more time. Now that the lines moved to 4.5 here. No, I'm gonna turn to my colleague and I'm gonna trust him. I'll take the Tar Heels minus 12.5. Let's have them get the ball out. Let's get it moving. Let's get some buckets against this Syracuse team. Syracuse is not very good. Syracuse has, to your point, they're good at home, and they've really struggled on the road so far. So yeah, I'll join you on the Tar Heels here. I just said that I think they're my number 2 team in the country. So if they really are that good, then we'd expect them to play well in this game. So that does it for the selections for me. Dayton plus 1.5 tonight against Duquesne. St. John's plus 8.5 against Creighton. Kentucky plus 1.5 against Texas A&M. And then New Mexico minus 1.5 and North Carolina minus 12.5 against Syracuse. We will toss this up on YouTube and get it out here momentarily. Hunter, appreciate you joining me. Tough day for us as dog fans, but we'll keep our heads held high and we'll come back stronger.
Washington's bigger than any one man, so we'll find a guy for the job.
Indeed. Thanks again. And again, Dayton plus 1.5, St. John's plus 8.5, Kentucky plus 1.5, New Mexico minus 1.5, and North Carolina minus 12.5. 47 and 26 on the year. We'll look to build on that this weekend. Thanks for tuning in. Go Huskies. We're going to keep our heads held high here, and hopefully we get some winning wagers to make things feel a little bit better as well. Thanks, Hunter.
Sure.